do this, so you can do that.
Sublime was a ska punk and reggae band that never got to properly experience their success. By the time their third album came out, the band ceased to exist, and most of their new fans had no clue the group were done. Today, let's look at the history of the band Sublime. Growing up in the Long Beach neighborhood of Belmont Shore, frontman and guitarist Bradley Nowell came from a musical family. His father worked as a home builder who played guitar in his spare time, and his father would become known for playing Jim Croce covers at parties, while his mother was a piano teacher. His parents would give him his first guitar lessons, but by the time he turned 10, they would divorce, with his mother taking custody of Bradley. She would tell VH1's Kind of Music that Nowell was a needy child and struggled in school, becoming disruptive and suffered from attention deficit disorder. Feeling overwhelmed by her son's behavior, Bradley would start living with his father at the age of 11. He took his son on a sailing trip around the U.S. Virgin Islands. It was here where he got his first exposure to Bob Marley and reggae music, which would be a huge influence on his career in music. Upon returning home from that sailing trip, Nowell was now a teenager, and he would play in punk rock bands in the early 80s with bassist Eric Wilson. Wilson would recall how those early jam sessions weren't very successful, telling the LA Times, "He was making me play reggae. I didn't want to play it," with Nowell adding, "I was trying to get them to do Cherry O Baby, and it didn't work. They tried, but it just sounded like garbage. We were horrible," he'd recall. Nowell and Wilson's musical projects would be put on the back burner. Walt Bradley went off to college. He would attend UC Santa Cruz for 2 years before he decided to study finance and transfer to Cal State. He only had 1 semester left before he dropped out, recalling the LA Times, "I have all the hard classes left. I doubt I'll ever go back." By this point in time, Nowell would return to Long Beach, and it was 1988. He reconnected with Wilson, who had an old neighbor he grew up with across the alley named Bud Gaw. Gaw was taught drums by Wilson's father, who was a jazz drummer, and Sublime's lineup was finally born. They would jam in Gaw's garage, and one of the first songs they would write would be, well, since this is YouTube, I'm not going to say the song's title, because the last time I said this word, let's play, there would be 2 other parties that night in the same neighborhood. Everybody was going to be at the Sublime party. But it wasn't an easy gig. Wilson would tell the LA Times, "We played some pretty rough neighborhoods. You'd have to be afraid for your own safety. Gangster kids would show up at parties and there would be trouble. Somebody got stabbed one time." And the gigs were so rough that Spin Magazine reported that Samoan guards would sometimes provide security at the gigs, and that the police would be a frequent presence, hovering over the gigs in their helicopters if the band played past the noise curfew. By 1990, Nowell would rescue a Dalmatian dog named Louie, who was referred to as Lou Dog, which was named after his grandfather and became the de facto mascot. He was also sometimes referred to as Nowell's alter ego. He would join the band on the road and sometimes on stage. It was during the same year, in the spring of 1990, that Michael Miguel Happel, a music student, offered to manage Sublime, enticing them with an offer of free studio time at the school he attended. He became the de facto 4th member of the band, helping produce their music, helping run their affairs, and record label, Skunk Records. The band, by this point in time, had already written songs and would sneak into Happel's school studio late at night and recorded their demo called "Ja Won't Pay the Bills," which would be released in 1991. The demo was helped by a word of mouth that helped the band develop a bigger following. The band's songs dealt with the dark and seedy side of California that they themselves witnessed growing up. According to VH1's Behind the Music, frontman Bradley Nowell swore off certain hard drugs, but his curiosity got the better of him. Nowell felt pressured to be more creative and saw musicians he looked up to indulging in hedonistic behavior. It was only a matter of time before he went down the same road. According to Nowell's peers, he thought that he could control his habit, but like so many stories in rock and roll, he couldn't. It was a decision that would have dire consequences for the future of the band. Using a $1,000 loan from Nowell's father, in 1991 the band financed and recorded their debut record, 40 Ounces to Freedom, on their own label, Skunk Records. The band sold the album out of the back of their van and was able to sell around 30,000 copies. And it was by that early point in the band's career that they were already headlining clubs. Despite the band's promising future, in the 2 years between their first album and their sophomore effort, the band members found themselves broke. 2 years of intense and hedonistic behavior left them with little to no money. Unable to pay for studio time, the band had to play additional live shows to raise some cash to record their sophomore effort, Robin the Hood, which came out in 1994. The album was recorded in an earthquake-damaged house with pirated electricity, according to Spin Magazine. Combining folksy acoustic music with rock rap and spoken word parts, their sophomore album was much more diverse than their first effort. The album also included a duet with No Doubt's Gwen Stefani. But from 1993 onwards, Noel's drug addiction only worsened. He was pretty open about his struggle, most notably on the song Pool Shark from their second record. The strains soon crossed over to their live shows, with Spin Magazine writing in the band's 1997 profile. It was impossible to ignore on those tours when Noel parked himself on the edge of the stage, the others noodling gamely while he was unable to make it through a song, let alone a set. Soon enough, rumors of the band members ODing started to circulate, with Goff saying, "Yeah, I think we've all been dead once or twice." Noel's habit got so bad that sometimes he'd pawn off the band's equipment while on tour, only for the group's manager to repeatedly get back their equipment in time for the band's shows. This would be captured on the song Pawn Shop. By early 1995, despite all their turmoil, Sublime had built a good local following, but they weren't getting a lot of national attention. That would soon change when local LA radio station K-Rock added the 3-year-old song Date Expletive, and it blew up on the station, becoming one of the most requested songs from listeners. In addition to that, it would be a UC Irvine station, KUCI FM 88.9, which had a show called Ska Parade. What's funny is that by this point in time, the band's live shows omitted the song from their setlist. The track's subject matter dealt with the perpetrator of a crime getting what's owed to him in prison. As you would expect, the song's title garnered a lot of controversy, but the band was unapologetic, with Noel revealing to the LA Times why he chose such a controversial subject to write a song about, saying, "Probably just because a certain word rhymed with another, and from there the song just took its course. There's no great message. Sorry, I'm just not a very deep guy," he would say. Despite the band's newfound success, they lacked distribution to get their albums out. A frequent question of those attending the band's live shows in 1995 was, and I quote, "Where can we get your record?" The band initially was offered a deal by Gasoline Alley, which was affiliated with major label MCA. The band set up a meeting with an executive from Gasoline Alley who made them wait hours in the label's office. The band had shown up intoxicated to the meeting with Lou Dog, and since they were left to wait for hours, they sent Lou Dog into the executive's office and left him a surprise. The deal would end up falling through, but almost half a year later, Gasoline Alley reconsidered and signed the band. The group's manager would tell the LA Times that he wanted to stay true to Sublime's punk roots, but at the same time acknowledged how difficult the industry is, saying, "I'm not proud of what we've done, but if we wanted to keep going and do what we're doing, the improved distribution and resulting infusion of cash was a necessity." The success of Date Expletive helped push 40 Ounces to Freedom onto the SoundScan alternative rock charts, where the album spent a whopping 70 weeks. It was during the summer of 1995 the band was invited to partake at K-Rock's Weenie Roast Festival. But rather than thanking their one ally who broke the band, they burnt bridges. For the performance, the band received 10 backstage passes to hand out to friends, and Sublime happened to have a friend with a computer and a printer who printed up another 300 passes and handed them out to all their friends back home in Long Beach. The backstage area was soon overrun by members of Sublime's entourage, and given the fire code requirements dealing with capacity limits, the people at K-Rock obviously weren't thrilled, but the stunt did little to deter the station from playing the band's music. It was around this time that Noel and his girlfriend Troy welcomed their first child together. Noel appeared to have finally straightened out.
I'm waiting for my coffee to kick in.
As the band
I'll choose some
reassembled in early
songs.
1996 to record their major label debut, Noel was under an enormous amount of pressure to deliver. The band didn't have too many songs written at this point in time. The initial sessions were done in Redondo in 1992, Caress Me Down, and doing work with Sublime, telling the Austin Chronicle that he first became familiar with the band when working with the Meat Puppets, saying, "I had a rental car and was listening to their local punk rock AM radio station, and they were playing Date Expletive probably 100 times a day, and I just loved it. When I got the call from my agent asking if I wanted to produce Sublime's record, it freaked me out," he'd say.
Yeah, it freaked me
Mark
out
Kaplan
too.
would recall the creative process for the group's third record, how it differed from their past efforts, saying, "Brad wrote the first 2 albums' lyrics first and got away from that. I think a lot of it was his drug use. He couldn't zero in on anything. So he'd fill up every track with freestyles, and Brad was like a fountainhead, never ran out of ideas, but a lot of it was gibberish. He'd say, 'I'm gonna go home and write lyrics for real,' but Paul was smart enough to say, 'No, you're not.' Then he and Stewart would comp the gibberish into a real song, which must have taken hours." Leary would recall how the band's hard partying showed up in the studio, recalling to the Chronicle, "One day they came at me looking all concerned, and I thought there was a problem. They said, 'We start recording at noon and we're already drunk. We need to start earlier in the day.' So I get there early the next morning and they show up with pictures of margaritas in hand, already drunk. It didn't matter what time you started, they were going to be drunk," he'd say. And that destructive behavior didn't end there, as Lou Dog scratched up all of the floors of the studio and had to be sent back home in a crate. The band almost burned down Willie Nelson's studio when they placed a towel over a light bulb in the studio sauna, setting the room on fire. The band also ended up crashing the studio car that they got around Austin in, and things didn't end there. The condos they were staying at during the recording of the album were trashed, and the group had to be relocated at least 3 times during the making of the album. This was just the tip of the iceberg, as Noel relapsed during the recording sessions, and they would continue to drag on, with him going to the bathroom for prolonged periods of time. Leary complained to the label about Noel's behavior, and he was immediately flown back home, and the sessions were ended. Noel's girlfriend Troy would end up leaving Brad temporarily, who worked on getting clean, which he did for several months. The band was finally able to finish off the album, and Brad and Troy would get married on May 18, 1996 in Las Vegas. Those around Noel were hopeful that he was going to stay clean for good. Several days after the wedding, the band embarked on a short tour of the West Coast. The first few shows went really well, and the band previewed their new material to sold-out audiences. But by the band's show on May 24, 1996 at the Phoenix Theater, Noel had relapsed. Following the show, the band was partying, and by the early hours of May 25, 1996, the 28-year-old frontman and guitarist called his wife, who he married 1 week prior. She could tell that he had been partying, but she was unaware that it would be the last time she would speak to her husband. The same morning, Noel went back to the motel room the band was staying in and tried to wake up his bandmates, who were resting after a long night of partying, to convince them to head down to the beach and watch the sunset with himself and Lou Dog. At some point later in the morning, Noel returned to the motel room, went to his stash, the same one Gaw used earlier in the morning. Gaw would wake up to see Noel lying on the floor unresponsive. Around the time his son Jacob was supposed to turn 1 and the group's major label debut was to be released, Gaw had some regret that he was spared the same day, telling LA Times, "I thought I was in hell. I thought that was probably supposed to be me." The Grim Reaper saw him laying on his side, saw tattoos, and thought, "That must be Bud." It was Brad's turn, though, he'd say. Troy would tell the LA Times her reaction at hearing the news of her husband's death, saying, "At first I was so angry. I wanted him here so I could yell at him." She would reveal in the same interview she had a familiar feeling when in late 1995 news broke of Blind Melon frontman Shannon Hoon succumbing to his own addictions. Recalling, "I looked at Brad and it was like a non-reality to him. That just had nothing to do with him. His attitude was, that guy was stupid, he just screwed up. It scared the hell out of me," she would say. Noel would spend the last 5 years of his life struggling with addiction. He'd been out of rehab at least 10 times and struggled immensely. And even the record label MCA had shelled out 6 figures for him to get clean. In the run-up to his death, and despite all the turmoil in the band, there was a sense that the group's 3rd album was going to be a monster hit. But MCA almost never released the album due to the band's existence being cut short. Sublime's 3rd album would be posthumously released in late July of 1996, but the label really had little sympathy for the band. Gaw would add in the same interview, "They wanted us to set up interviews and tryouts for the new Sublime singer. The show must go on. You guys are getting back on the bus. I swear to God, 2 weeks from now, you guys are going to be out there playing stadiums. Find somebody good." Gaw and Wilson would say no to the label, feeling that they couldn't replace Noel. The first single from their 3rd album, What I Got, would be once again picked up by K-Rock, and it soon blew up across America. The album was a monster hit, selling over 6 million copies and launching 4 singles, including Santeria and Wrong Way, which are still staples of rock radio to this day. Apart from Sublime, 1996 was a very difficult time for rock music. Drugs soon became synonymous with high-profile rock bands, including Stone Temple Pilots, Pantera, Depeche Mode, Alice in Chains, and Smashing Pumpkins. It would result in the industry trying to establish health programs for artists, with others blasting these efforts. Noel's wife Troy would criticize the band's label following her husband's death, telling the Chicago Tribune, "As soon as he get out of rehab or get clean, the record label will put him out on the road. They never give him enough time to stay clean or start working on a program. But that's not their business. They're in the business of making music and making records." Michael Green, who is the president of the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, or NARAS, rankled record label heads by declaring that executives should be publicly humiliated if they turned a blind eye to artists' addictions, while also profiting from their work. In the aftermath of Noel's death, several posthumous releases featuring leftover songs were put out, with the surviving members moving on to other musical projects, including Long Beach Dub All-Stars. Lou Dog, meanwhile, will be cared for by the band's manager, who passed away on September 17, 2001. When Lou Dog passed away, his family wanted to make sure he was resting with Noel, so his ashes were scattered in the same spot as the former Sublime frontman. In 2009, the surviving members of Sublime reunited under the band's name, with Ron Ramirez fronting the group. It would result in a legal battle from Troy and Noel's estate, and they would soon change their name to Sublime with Rome, Long Beach band Law. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe.
Okay, that was
Rock and roll
cool.
stories. Take care. Jane's Addiction were without a doubt one of the most influential alternative rock bands, but rather than embracing spandex and poofy hair that was so prevalent from their hometown of LA, the band combined elements of classic rock, punk, funk, metal, and goth. Jane's Addiction were the antithesis to everything that was popular at the time. Rolling Stone would perfectly summarize what was going on around the time of Jane's Addiction's early days, writing, "In the era of Just Say No, lip syncing, and power ballads, the only other band that comes close is fellow LA export Guns N' Roses. But as Perry Farrell has said, there's a lot of bands like Guns N' Roses, there's not a lot of bands like us. One thing..."
Nobody's coming. I'm just about to play some dancing music.
What the band shared with Guns N' Roses was that they shed a light on the more seedy, rough, and darker sides of Los Angeles. Alongside being labeled alternative, the press would also bestow upon them the label of being an art band. While Nirvana gets a lot of credit for bringing alternative rock to the masses, others cite Jane's Addiction, with Rage Against the Machine guitarist Tom Morello stating, "Nirvana often gets credit for being the first alternative band to break through. The band that changed music. That's just not true. It was Jane's Addiction."
I'm getting ready. Okay,
hello. Intelligent, fiercely rocking, and artistically deep. Today, let's explore the complicated history of Jane's Addiction.
If I'm not fat, then how come I ate 7 donuts in like 13 minutes?
The all-new Lexus RX is equipped with state-of-the-art technology.
You found your earbud? Good.
Integrated intelligent assistant, advanced park for easy arrival and departure, and a 14-inch touchscreen with wireless Apple CarPlay.
Hey. You want me to end this and call you? I haven't even started dancing yet. You were hungry. I also ate lasagna and a chorizo wrap with chipotle sauce.
Provocative, flamboyant, and driven. The frontman would be born Perry Bernstein in Queens, New York. He lived in the Diamond District and his father would be a jeweler. Perry would frequently take along with his dad, telling Rolling Stone, "All the gift does was buy jewelry off me." They couldn't say no because I was so adorable in my Beatles haircut and Beatles suit. His mother, an artist, would take her own life when Perry was
You're
just
not fat.
4, and she would be forever immortalized.
You're learning. You're catching on. Good for
By
you.
the time his mother would pass,
Proud of
Perry's
you.
father was
I'm
having
so
extramarital
proud of
affair
you.
with a woman who would eventually become his stepmother. It wasn't too long after his mother passed that the family relocated to Long Island, and during his teenage years headed south to Miami. But life in Miami saw Perry more preoccupied with surfing.
Talk later. Time to take it. Okay,
Even
bye.
telling Rolling Stone, "I like
Okay,
to be
bye.
esoteric and strange,
Buenos
and school
dias.
is not full of esoteric
Glad
and
that's
strange
it.
things." In an
Buenos
era of
dias.
just say no, Perry's motto soon became "Let's try it." In the aftermath of his mother
Bye.
passing, Perry's father kept
Peace and
questioning
love.
company, having a lot of women and drugs around his home when Perry was young. He would even blame his father for his mother's death and had a complicated relationship with his father in the subsequent years. Perry would also have an older brother and sister, each of which influenced a young Perry with their own
1, 2,
musical
3,
tastes.
4,
His
5,
love of the
6,
Beatles and
7.
Stones would come from his brother, while his sister was steeped in black culture and introduced Perry to James Brown and Sly and the Family Stone.
Bye. Te amo. Te amo mucho. Adios. Bella. Arrivederci, Bella. Arrivederci. Ciao, Bella. Ciao. Bye. Fuck it. Oh, fuck it. I'm just gonna end this. I haven't even danced. I don't feel like dancing, no dancing. Don't feel like dancing, dancing. Don't feel like dancing, dancing. Okay, bye. I love you. This is not my stream. Not my stream. Not my stream. Not my stream. No, that's not my most active. I didn't even get this. No symbol dancing.
By the age of 17, wanting to rebel, Perry bought